You'll never believe how it started. It was late summer harvest season on our family's small wheat farm in Kansas. My folks, Michael and Susan, and my older brother David and younger sister Emily were out in the fields by sunrise, cutting wheat stalks and baling hay under a blazing sky. I was helping feed the cattle at the edge of the property when I first saw him, a thin, dusty man trudging down the dirt road with a battered backpack and a weary expression. Nobody in our tight-knit community recognized him, but Dad, always willing to lend a hand, called out, "Hey, you look thirsty. Come on back and grab a drink." We offered him water and a spot to rest in the shade. He nodded his thanks and introduced himself as Jack, though none of us had ever heard of a Jack wandering our way. I didn't protest after all. Who turns away someone clearly worn out? But even then, something felt off. By daylight, Jack did exactly what he said he would. He was up before dawn, helping Dad hook trailers to the tractor, stacking the bales of hay, and tending to the cattle without missing a beat. He'd pitch in with chores, fixing fence lines, hauling firewood, even offering tips on how to run the baler more efficiently. All the while, he spun these unbelievable road trip stories about seeing ghost towns in New Mexico, hitchhiking through the Rockies, and campfires where the ashes glowed blue under a moonlit sky. My parents and siblings listened, enthralled, though I suspected half of it was tall tales. He was polite, unassuming, and seemed genuinely eager to help. Everyone trusted him, everyone except me. When night fell, though, Jack vanished into the dense stand of cottonwood and oak lining our property. He'd return before sunrise, clothes crusted with mud, cheeks hollow like he'd been digging all night. I watched him slip away one evening as the orange light faded, heading toward the woods with an old shovel slung across his shoulder. I should have ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. I followed him, keeping my distance. I found him bent over a freshly turned patch of earth. In the pale moonlight, he unearthed a rusted pickaxe head, a broken pocket watch, and a stack of faded photograph sepia portraits of smiling families long gone. I crept back before he noticed me, but the image of Jack whispering, "These are stories nobody tells," replayed in my mind for nights afterward. Our dogs Sherman, our hulking black lab, and Daisy, a feisty terrier, usually guarded the yard with unshakable confidence. But whenever Jack strolled past, both of them froze, hackles raised, and backed away. It wasn't growls, just this instinctive recoil that looked like fear. I knew better than to ignore an animal's instincts. Rumors began drifting through town that something strange was happening on the old Miller farm, weird lights flickering in the woods, shadows dancing among the trees, and faint, unearthly moans at night. Folks whispered at Peterson's Feed and Supply about people who'd vanished from the county over the past decade, teenagers, a lone drifter, even a whole family, all last seen near that stand of woods during harvest. Some said those woods were cursed, that anyone who wandered in after dark never came out the same if they came out at all. One moonlit night, I confronted Jack near the hay barn. The dew was heavy on the grass, the air cold enough to make my breath fog. Under the soft glow of that full moon, I finally asked, "Why are you here? What are you doing in our woods?" He didn't flinch, just looked at me, eyes glinting in the pale light, and said, "Some things never leave these fields." His voice was steady, but there was a hardness in his gaze that sent a chill through me. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "What did you dig up out there? Last week, I saw you burying things, or digging them up." He offered a faint half smile. "Memories," he said. "Those who disappear leave behind pieces of themselves. I'm just collecting what was forgotten." My heart pounded. Like my neighbor's daughter, Katie. She was 12 when she vanished during harvest 2 years ago. I remembered her fairy wings and sparkly socks, the last time I saw her. No trace was ever found. "What do you mean collecting what was forgotten?" I demanded. His gaze flicked toward the woods, as though he was listening for something no one else could hear. "I find their keepsakes, he said. Locked away where the earth swallows them. Then he turned and slipped into the trees, leaving me shivering on the cold dirt. I spent the next day hustling between chores, distracted by that conversation. How could Jack have such knowledge of Katie's disappearance? And how many more had suffered the same fate? That evening, I managed to stay awake until almost midnight. When the house was dark and everyone else was asleep, I tiptoed out with a flashlight, my father's old .22 slung over my shoulder more for courage than for any real plan. I crept toward the woods, trying to be silent, heart thumping so loudly I was certain Jack would hear it. I found him kneeling by the creek that winds behind the property. It's usually bone dry this time of year, but heavy rains had filled it with a shallow pool. As I watched, he dipped into a muddy bank and pulled out a small, tarnished locket. I knelt without thinking and snatched it before he could bury it again. It was Katie's locket, a tiny gold heart with her name engraved on it, and inside, a picture of her smiling in a pink dress. My hands shook so badly I dropped it, but I recovered it quickly and raced back across the field, stumbling over old wagon ruts and tangled grass. The next morning, I confronted my mom. "Look," I said, dropping the locket on the kitchen table. The chain clanged, making my sister Emily jump from the breakfast bench. Mom gently picked it up, her eyes filling with tears. "Oh, Katie," she whispered. We thought maybe she ran away, but," her voice trailed off. I realized in that moment how much we and the rest of the county had been living in denial. Katie was gone, and now I held her locket in my hands. That afternoon, a group of neighbors gathered at Peterson's to talk about what to do. "We've got to chase him off," Mr. Burgess said, slamming a fist on his chair. "He's desecrating everything out there in the woods." But my dad shook his head. "We can't just run him off. If we do, who knows what else will happen." Mom folded her arms. "He's been placing Katie's little things in that creek like an offering, or maybe a warning." Mr. Burgess scowled. "All he's doing is stirring something worse than us. The woods are unsettled." That night, a ferocious storm rolled in. Lightning ripped the sky apart, thunder so loud it felt like the barn walls would collapse. I lay awake, listening to the wind lash the eaves. Then I heard it chanting, low and rhythmic, like the pages of a grim hymn turning in the dark. I jumped out of bed, sure I was dreaming, but it only got louder as I approached the back door. I crept outside, rain soaking my jeans, and followed the sound into the woods. I found a clearing illuminated by a series of tiny, flickering lanterns hung from the low branches of oak trees. In the center, a circle had been cleared on the forest floor, candles burned on a makeshift altar, and villagers I recognized, men, women, even my own dad, stood wrapped in dark coats, chanting in low voices. Jack knelt before them, head bowed, placing Katie's locket on a crossbeam atop the altar. On the ground lay other trinkets, a broken toy car, a battered photograph of a couple with a smiling baby girl, a hairbrush with a mother's name scratched on the back. My blood froze. This was no ordinary ritual. The candles' flames flitted and danced, throwing odd shadows on the oak trunks. One gust of wind, and the flames died out instantly, plunging everything into blackness. I bolted, heart pounding so loud I'd never have heard a whisper. Rain pelted my back as I ran toward home, branches cracking overhead. When I burst through our back door, I was drenched, shaking like a leaf. My dad caught me by the arm. "Son," what? His eyes were wide with panic as I stammered out what I'd just seen. He swallowed hard. "We did it to protect the farm," he said in a low voice. "But maybe we went too far." That night, I hardly slept. In my dreams, I was back in that clearing, the lantern's glow pulsing like beating hearts, villagers chanting as Jack unearthed memories of the lost. I woke before dawn with sweat on my face, gasping. I knew what had to happen. I had to force Jack and the rest of us to stop this strange, twisted ceremony before more people disappeared. A few nights later, under a crescent moon, I crept back into the woods armed with my father's old rifle and a fierce, desperate resolve. The wind was eerily still, as though the forest itself was waiting. I reached the clearing, but to my shock, flames were licking at the bases of the oaks, an inferno that seemed to erupt out of nowhere, spreading so fast I could feel the heat on my skin. I saw Jack standing on a fallen log, chanting. His arms were raised, his eyes glowed with that same hard intensity I'd seen before. As though reacting to his voice, the flames burned higher, swallowing ferns, twisting trunks into smoldering pillars. I shouted, "Stop it, Jack," and fired a warning shot into the air. The howl of the rifle seemed to fuel the blaze. I ran toward him, knowing I had to stop this before the entire stand of woods turned to embers. I grabbed his arm, but he was like a statue, shaking him made no difference. Panicked, I swung at him with my rifle's butt, surprising him enough that he staggered backward. My brother David and Dad arrived just then, tackling him to the ground. He screamed something not quite human, a sound that made my teeth ache. He then bolted into the inferno, disappearing in a flash of sparks and smoke. The flames roared, crackling like a living thing, but within an hour, an unexpected downpour of rain, cold, relentless, doused the blaze. By morning, the inferno was nothing but blackened stumps and charred leaves. The woods, once lush and green, looked like a graveyard of ash. The next day, we gathered what remained of our belongings and moved away, leaving behind the farm my family had owned for generations. The little town we were headed to barely knew us, but at least the county lines kept those cursed woods at arm's length. Still, even miles away, I couldn't escape it. I had nightmares of Katie's ghost and Jack's hollow eyes. Then one afternoon, walking along the riverbank near our new rented house, I spotted a flash of gold in the mud. I waded in and pulled out Katie's locket again. My hands trembled as I realized, this thing had trailed me hundreds of miles. That night, I dreamed of Jack, kneeling by a blackened basin in a hidden grove, whispering, "We are not done." I woke with a start, heart hammering. The next morning, I packed a small bag, some sandwiches, a flashlight, my dad's old rifle, and a handful of pent-up determination and drove back toward the burned-out farm. I needed to finish what Jack had started, or whatever haunted those woods might follow me forever. When I got there, the fields were blackened and sad, but new green shoots poked through the ashes as if they refused to give up. I hiked into the woods, moving deeper than I'd ever dared before. The air smelled of damp earth and charred wood. Eventually, I found the moss-covered stone platform Jack had used, etched with symbols I couldn't recognize. At its center was a shallow basin that collected rainwater. Around it lay dozens of small relics, a chipped coffee mug with mom scratched into the bottom, a rusted pocket watch, a marble with a child's name faintly etched on it, and, half buried, Katie's locket. My heart pounded. I knew this was exactly where I had to be. I gathered all the relics, the mug, the pocket watch, the marble, and finally, the locket. Kneeling by the basin, I placed each one on the wet stone as I whispered, "Spirits of the woods, I'm sorry. We neglected what you asked for. Please, let them find rest." Water pooled around the objects. The moment I finished, a sudden breeze rustled through the canopy, as though the forest itself exhaled in relief. Then I heard a familiar voice, soft, resigned, yet somehow at peace. I looked up to see Jack standing in the gloom, older somehow, his face still lined by sorrow. He held a battered shovel draped over his shoulder. I swallowed hard. "Is it over?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "I can go now," he said. "Their spirits are free." He stepped forward, placing Katie's locket on the stone rim. The basin's water swirled, glowed faintly silver, and then absorbed the locket into its depths. Jack exhaled deeply, shoulders relaxing for the first time. "Thank you," he whispered. I felt my own chest unclench, relief flooding through me. What happens now? I asked quietly. He offered a faint, half smile. I stay here, with the woods. I'm part of it now, watching over it so no one suffers the way they did. His eyes glowed in the dim light. Whenever the wind drifts through the treetops, that's me, standing guard. Then he turned and vanished into the darkness between the trunks, leaving only a quiet hush. I rose and glanced around. The broken branches and blackened trunks were still scarred, but I noticed green shoots pushing through the ground near the platform, little signs of life insisting on coming back. I felt a warm weight in my pocket where the locket used to be, and I knew that part of Jack's spirit, Katie's memory, would now live on in the earth. As I made my way out of the woods, the sun was just breaking over the horizon, casting a golden glow that made the ash look almost beautiful. A week later, my family returned for good. We rebuilt the farmhouse ourselves, brick by brick, and replanted the fields. The new wheat stalks shimmered under the sun, and every morning, the wind riffled through them, sounding almost like a whisper, "We are here." We hung a small wind chime from the porch, a gift for Jack, so whenever the breeze passed, I could hear its gentle tinkle and think of him watching over us. Now, I tell my own kids, Luke and Maggie, the story of the drifter who wandered into our lives that harvest season. I tell them how he dug for the memories others had buried and taught us that honoring the past, even when it's painful, can heal old wounds. And if you listen closely on quiet nights, you can hear the wind through the wheat telling you, "We are one." I never thought I'd be back on that old corn farm, but there I was, driving down the dusty lane as the sun dipped behind a line of grain silos. It was late July, and Mom and Dad had invited all of us home for their 30th wedding anniversary. Growing up, I'd spent every summer here chasing fireflies, riding in the back of Dad's old pickup, and laughing with cousins in the fields. Now I lived in New York City, so I'd been out of the loop for a decade. But tonight, this place felt like a memory I couldn't shake. Pulling up to the barn, lanterns and paper lights swayed in the humidity. The smell of barbecue hit me first, ribs, burgers, corn on the cob, country aromas I hadn't tasted in years. Somewhere, someone strummed a country guitar. The farmhouse, paint peeling white, sat at the field's edge, its porch boards weathered by 1,000 summers. Dad stood by the pickup, looking smaller than I remembered, gray already creeping into his mustache. He spotted me and gave a bear hug so tight I thought my ribs might crack. "Son, you made it?" His voice boomed like it used to when I was a kid. I laughed and hugged him back. "Wouldn't miss it." Mom was nearby, wearing a sundress from back in the 80s, her hair pinned up like always. She waved me over, pressing a cold lemonade into my hand. She smelled like magnolias and toothpaste, exactly like home. "You look good," she said. I took a sip, welcoming the cool sweetness. Feels good to be back. Even though it felt familiar, something about the field made my skin crawl. The corn stalks were absurdly tall this year, like walls. At night, they used to rustle even when there was no breeze, whispering secrets. And sometimes, I thought I heard a growl, deep and hungry, echoing through the rows. I'd never told anyone how much that terrified me. Tonight, though, I let the celebration sweep me away. Cousins raced through the yard, chasing kids, waving sparklers. Dad checked on the grill, Aunt Judy sang "Take Me Home," country roads off-key, while local friends joined in. Meanwhile, I tried to forget what waited in those endless green walls. But later, when the last marshmallow had been roasted and the kids were corralled upstairs, I slipped onto the porch to catch a breather. Dad joined me, handing me a beer. He stared into the field, brows furrowed. "You okay?" he asked. I took a slow swallow. "Yeah. Just, wow. It's been a while." He nodded and took a drink, then muttered, "That crop's something else." He didn't have to explain. The stalks rose so high they blocked out half the sky. Even I felt smaller, like a kid again. Dad sighed. You remember your grandpa's stories, he said. About the field. That it's alive. Ghost stories, I scoffed, but my heart pounded. Dad gave me a knowing look. Son, I heard something out there last night. A deep growl like nothing I've ever heard. He swallowed. It's been here a long time. He didn't elaborate. Mama stepped out, closing the porch light. Good night, boys, she said softly, turning away. Get some sleep before tomorrow. I set my beer down, nodding, but I stayed. The porch creaked with age, and the wind picked up, stirring the leaves. I closed my eyes, listening. A faint hum rolled from somewhere deep in the corn, felt more than heard. My skin prickled. I grabbed my flashlight and crept to the side of the house. The moon was full, casting pale light on the field. Through the stalks, I thought I saw something move, a shadow slipping between the leaves. I blinked, and it was gone, but the sense of being watched remained. I snuck back inside, tossing off my jeans and crawling into the old bunk bed I'd slept in as a kid. But sleep didn't come. I lay in the dark, listening to the floorboards groan and the wind howling around the eaves. Then, a low, guttural rumble echoed, so deep it felt like the field itself was breathing. I bolted upright. My heart thundered. I dragged myself out of bed, tiptoed to the window. The cornstalks, silver in the moonlight, bowed as if swaying toward me. My pulse shot through my veins. I couldn't stay. I slipped out the door with my flashlight. The night air was sticky, the ground cold underfoot. I crept to the field's edge, shining the beam down the rows. Tall walls of corn rose on either side, no path, just green-black towers. The wind died. Silence fell. My breath caught. Then, from somewhere deep within, that same growl rolled out. Tremors chased up my legs, rattling my bones. I stumbled back, hands shaking, and dashed inside. I collapsed against the door, locked it, and leaned there until my shoulders stopped heaving. That growl wasn't a coyote. It wasn't dogs or tractors. It was something old, something hungry. I sobbed into the wood until exhaustion claimed me. When I woke hours later, dawn had broken. The hush of the night was gone, replaced by cicadas. I rubbed my eyes, heart still pounding, and vowed, tomorrow, I'd confront this fear. Morning brought blistering heat and a chorus of rural life, cows lowing, chickens crowing, and the hum of a tractor in the distance. I dragged myself downstairs to find Dad and Uncle Earl already up, loading tools into a beat-up pickup. Today's plan: mark a safe perimeter around the field. Dad believed that if we could define a boundary, we could keep the kids from wandering too close. I grabbed coffee and a granola bar, forcing down the bitter burn. Mom was scolding the younger cousins, warning them, stay on the path. Aunt Linda packed sandwiches and water bottles. Even Ty, my older brother, who spent most of his time bull riding in Texas, seemed uneasy. I don't buy this ghost nonsense, he muttered, but he was pale. We piled into 2 trucks, Dad and Uncle Earl in one, Mom, Ty, and me in the other. I rode shotgun in Mom's truck, watching the field grow larger in the mirror. The corn stood relentless, a wall of green that seemed to warp reality, towering over the horizon. At the field's edge, Dad hammered stakes into the ground, tying bright orange tape between them. 10 paces apart, he insisted, wiping sweat from his brow. Make a ring, keep our own circle. Uncle Earl flipped through Grandpa's old journal, confirming landmarks, the scarecrow post, an old wooden stake that marked the halfway point to the field's heart. Dad studied the map, then nodded to Uncle Earl, start there. So we pressed into the field. The ground was tacky with dew, and every step made a soft pop as we moved between the stalks. The sun was merciless, burning through the leaf canopy in patches, making our skin sizzle. I knelt to plant a stake, hammering it home until my knuckles burned. The tape snapped in the breeze, bright as a lifeline against the endless green. Halfway in, we found the scarecrow post, an old, splintered chunk of wood buried in a mound of dirt. Dad's face went grim as he wiped dirt from his hands. "This is where Grandpa vanished." He glanced around, voice low. "We keep going from here." No one spoke. We climbed back into the trucks and went deeper, following directions from the journal. The murmur of the stalks overhead was constant, like 1,000 voices whispering just beyond comprehension. I felt watched, as though the field's eyes were on me. Sweat dripped down my forehead. Then something shifted. A single stalk bowed to the ground, bending like a reed. I froze, heart hammering. Before I could react, a low voice, deep, terrible, rumbled. It rolled out of the soil and echoed through the rows. My breath caught. The ground vibrated, faint but unmistakable. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping my stake. Dad signaled us to keep moving. "Ignore it," he said. "Keep going." But the voice swelled, roaring across the field, and I felt each syllable in my bones. The corn stalks around me swayed until they bowed into the center of the row, as if bowing down to something unseen. I swallowed, stepping back until my shoulder hit the truck's fender. Aunt Linda hissed, echoing my panic. Ty looked at Dad, eyes wide. "Dad, we gotta get out of here." I said. "Ignore it," Dad snapped, but his voice shook. Uncle Earl knelt by a row, running gloved fingers over a half-buried stone circle etched with spirals and runes. "The heart," he whispered. "This is it." Dad flicked open his flashlight. The beam caught a ring of stones, vines snaking around them. In the center, the soil was blacker than anything I'd ever seen, slick, almost oily, and pulsing with warmth. Roots peeked through, writhing like something alive. A distant, sorrowful sigh rose, so soft it felt like a breath against my cheek. My vision blurred. Mom grabbed me by the arm. "Stay close," she said, voice trembling. Ty stepped forward, shining his light on the black ground. "What the hell is this?" he asked, voice tight. Uncle Earl spread the journal open. "The binding words," he said. "We must say them or we'll never leave." Dad's hand hovered, confused. "What words?" I shook, glancing between the pages and that pulsing earth. My grandfather's handwriting stared up at me. "My steps belong to this earth that bore me. My breath returns to the soil that sustains me. I bind my fear to the roots that feed. In this circle, my soul is freed." We formed a rough circle around the stones. Uncle Earl started us, his voice hoarse. "My steps belong to this earth," Mom picked up, voice wavering. "My breath returns," Dad's voice joined. "I bind my fear," Ty squeezed my hand. "In this circle, my soul is freed." The moment we finished, the murmur exploded into a roar that rattled the stalks. The ground trembled beneath us and then, silence. A pocket of nothing suspended us. I flicked my light, expecting something monstrous to lurch up, but instead, the black soil in the stone circle glowed faintly, then dimmed. The roots stopped pulsing. The cornstalks straightened, standing still, as if watching. Dad exhaled in relief. "It's done." I forced my knees not to buckle. Did it work?" Uncle Earl nodded, closing the journal. "Those words bind it? It can't claim another life without passing through here." Mom brushed a tear from her cheek. "We've freed it for now." The hush shifted, becoming softer like a sigh of gratitude. I let out a long breath. Ty cracked his knuckles and flashed a grin. "Guess you're not a city kid anymore, huh?" I managed a small laugh, wrapping an arm around him. "Not exactly." We retraced our steps out, passing the now quiet stalks. When we cleared the rows, the bright Kansas sky felt a gift. Dawn's sun warmed our faces. Alone on the porch later, I stared out at the field, its green still vibrant, but gentler now. The field was alive, but maybe it had been sated. That night, for the first time in years, I slept. No growls, no whispers. Only the soft moan of the wind through the screen. The next morning, sunshine and a chorus of birds greeted us. In the kitchen, Mom flipped pancakes while Dad compared phone quotes for new seed orders. Mid-height hybrids next year, he said. Safe crop, reliable yield. Uncle Earl leafed through Grandpa's journal, marking a page. We'll lock this away. Only we need to know. I poured myself coffee and stepped onto the porch, the early light glancing off the tidy rows of corn. Everything looked normal, endless green, tassels twitching. But I knew deeper things lay hidden beneath the soil. As kids milled around, giggling about a hayride later, I wandered down the path, staking a glance at the field. It felt less foreboding now, almost welcoming. I knelt by a stray tassel, touching the leaves. No rumble. No whisper, just warm earth brushing my fingers. Later, we held a modest celebration, leftover barbecue, ice cream, and sparklers. Uncle Earl strummed his guitar, playing Hank Williams. A few cousins made up a line dance on the driveway, stomping boots and swinging scarves. I joined in, hammering my feet and clapping to the beat. Sometimes I caught Mom's eye, she'd give a small nod, a smile that meant, we made it through. I let the night wash over me. The lanterns glowed, reflecting on syrupy faces. The field stood behind us, a silent sentinel cheering us on. A week later, I loaded my bags into my old sedan and hugged Mom, Dad, and Ty goodbye. Uncle Earl handed me a folded map just in case, he said. I blinked back tears. I'll be back. I promised. Driving away, I caught the field in my rearview mirror. The stalks shimmered in twilight, endless, peaceful, no longer a wall of terror but a reminder of something ancient and alive. Back in New York, life swallowed me whole, commutes, skyscrapers, deadlines. But sometimes, late at night, I'd close my eyes and hear a gentle rustle, like wind through leaves. I'd smile, imagining those corn stalks, reaching toward the sky. I kept Grandpa's journal on a shelf by my bed, and every spring, I planted a single kernel in a pot on the windowsill. It would sprout, stalks stretching tall, leaves quivering in the breeze. I'd whisper, "Good morning," and pretend that field's hush was replying, "Good morning, evangelist." Safe in the city, I carried that lesson. We all have fields we've got to face, dark, hungry places within us, where old secrets lie. The only way through is to speak the truth, bind our fear, and stand together. Because courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act in spite of it. And every summer, when the air warms and storms drift in, I remember that night in the corn, when I stood before something so old it felt alive. I remember Grandpa and Dad and Mom, and how, together, we walked through the field, said the words our grandfather wrote, and set that ancient thing free. Goodbye until the corn calls again.